Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything, and I'm coming back at you with another Wargaming and miniature video. This video, we're going to go ahead and continue on with our Painting 101. In this video, we're going to be talking about texturing and flocking the base. What we're going to do now is I'm using Drydex, which is a spackle, and what we're going to do is we're going to apply it to the base in between the figures on in the unit. So when you look at your base, you see that it has well, okay, let me rephrase that. When you look at your figure, you notice this has its own little base, and that base is what I glued to the square base. Now that base is a bump. It makes the model look like it's standing on a hill, like one little personalized little hill in the terrain. But when you apply the putty, you want to make sure that you go up to the edge of the model's base and then fill in the gaps between the bases to make the models not look like they're standing on their own individual bases. It'll make it look like all of them are standing on the same piece of terrain. Okay, so you go through and you coat the base. Now, you don't have to coat the entire base. You're going to paint it. You're going to flock it. But what you're doing is you're trying to alleviate that mound of their figure base. All right, and be very careful not to apply the putty to the model itself, like the feet or anything like that, because you spent quite a bit of time painting these figures, so why would you want to ruin it by putting this putty on the figure? All right, so we continue on. We're going to do this base, and then we'll be back in just a second. All right, guys, let me adjust the focus a little bit so you can see what I'm doing here, but I'm going to let you see a close-up view of what's... Okay, where do I find the focus? All right, so I should be able to get this up a little bit closer so you can see the putty, or not the putty, but the spackling and how I applied it to the base and made their miniature figure bases even. And what it does also, it gives you a little bit of texture on the base too, giving it a little realistic look. All right, so let me do all these other bases and I'll be right back. All right, now that this has dried, what we're going to do is there's a couple of different methods of making your bases look authentic. One of them is to apply a grit, which is a sand and rock mixture, on your bases, and then you go in, you paint the sand, you dry brush the rocks and things like that, and then you put the flock on sparingly in corners and stuff like that to make it look like it's mixed terrain, like dirt and grass. Okay, well, I'm not going to bother with that step because I plan on, with my French army, I plan on entirely flocking the entire base to give it more of a European field like look. I don't want it to look decimated or barren or anything like that. So to get that look, it's a two-step process. The first step is I'm going to take my clover, remember my clover, and I'm going to paint it all over the base. All right, here we go. All right, now you might have noticed that I put down some wax paper. I did that so that once I paint the base and I set it down, any paint that I put along the edge of the base doesn't get all over your work material. It'll get on this, and that's fine. This can be replaced. And then I'm also using my hook brush that I still haven't fixed. Okay, so here we go. Now what I'm being careful to do is paint the base under the feet, and of course all the white. You want to cover all the white. But you don't want to paint the boots, obviously, because you spent all that time painting the boots. Now I'm holding the edge of the base. But there's going to be a point where I can't hold the edge anymore, so then I'll have to grab the figures themselves. Like right now. All right, so the plaster, the spackle that we put on, it is kind of flimsy, if that's a good word. It is kind of subject to cracking or chipping off. So by painting it, and then later I'm going to be applying a layer of glue on top of it, on top of the paint, will hold it all in place, and you will not have to worry about any chips or flakes after the glue process. Okay, and then I'm going to paint the sides of the base as we go along. I do still need to get in the middle there. I'm digging the fact, this is just a personal observation, I'm digging the fact that these 40mm bases with 4 figures leaves enough room for me to get inside these between the figures. There have been other games that I've played, Napoleon's Battles, where you put the figures on a base and they are way too close to get inside. But this one seems to be working just fine. Okay, so now I've got all 4 sides of the base covered, and I got all the white covered. And so what I do is I'm going to set this off to the side and let it dry. So now we're going to go on to the next guy. When I get them all done, we'll be back for the next step. Actually, let me rephrase that. When I get them all done and the green has dried, we'll be back for the next step. All right, guys, we're on our last base here. There was something I thought about while I was painting that I thought I might want to share with you guys as part of this tutorial. There's a philosophy out there about what color to paint the base and how to texture it and what to use and things like that. And there's a lot of good ideas out there. I've seen a lot of people do some really good work. But let me tell you why I am not well, let me tell you what some of the other thought processes are. Hey, let's do that. A lot of people will paint the base like what I'm doing here. They'll paint it like a dark brown color, and that'll simulate like the dirt, so that when you do flock it, the flock sits on top of the dirt, and your flock is representing the field grass or the grass, you know, that grows on the battlefield. And so you have like a brown undercoat and then the green grass on the top. What that tends to do is cause the grass to look dark and dingy. It doesn't look like thick, healthy grass. It looks like dying grass or burnt grass. Which is a good effect. That, don't get me wrong, that effect does look really, really, really good. That's just not the effect that I am going for in this case. What the effect I'm going for is a green field of healthy grass, the field of Waterloo, basically. Waterloo and Quatre Bras and Ligny, these fields in my, what do you call it? My imagination, those fields are untouched and they're green grass and it's meadows of grass. And so what I wanted was to make them bright green or very green. So when you apply your grass material or scatter material, the grass will not, and plus the way I use the way I apply the PVA Elmer's glue, it will not give a 100% coat, and you will see through the grass. And that's why a lot of people use brown, so that you can see the brown beneath the grass. But if I paint the ground green, any spot that I'm unable to paint will wind up, unable to flock, will wind up looking green. So the flock underneath will, let me rephrase that. The flock will look like there's no gaps, even though there might technically be a gap. But the green undercoat will disguise that. I hope I explained that well. I'm sorry if I didn't. Okay, so now let's get the edges of this stand. And then we're going to let it dry, and I'll be right back. Alright guys, the green has dried on the bases of my models here. And so now what I've done is I'm going to use an empty paint area, an empty bin for my Elmers. And I'm also going to use water because I'm going to thin the Elmers down. I'm going to use my Textrure's paint applicator brush, or my glue applicator brush. And then what I'm going to do is flock with the I think this is from Bosch. Yeah, it's a Bosch railroading scatter. I think it's green field or green glade, and so we're going to go ahead and get started doing that. Okay, so take our Elmers. Alright, so you see the Elmers right there. Or white PVA. And then I give it another 50%. It's like 1-to-1 scale water to Elmers. Right? And then I take my brush and I stir the water and the glue together. You don't want it to be clumpy like what you're seeing. You want it to be mixed so that you get even coating, yeah, you don't want it to be clumpy. Okay, so give me a second to stir this up. It does take a minute or two. Okay guys, what do you think about this? It's not watery, it's not clumpy, it's not, yeah, it's none of those. So let's go, and holding the figures with a dry hand, I'm going to take the glue on my brush and I'm going to apply it to everywhere that I painted green, except for the sides. I don't like, personally I don't flock the sides of bases. Sometimes I do actually, but most of the time no. And you want to apply it with a thick coat. It doesn't have to be a thin coat. You want it to be fairly thick, so that the flock will adhere to it. And this glue is actually also serving as an extra coat of glue holding the figures down. It's also holding the spackle in place. I think that looks good. I think it's completely covered. All right. So then we take our fingers, I don't know if you can see this. We get our grass, we take our fingers, and we sprinkle it on. We drop from a few inches so it kind of scatters. And unlike some modelers, I don't shake it off. I take it and place it in a box gingerly so none of the flock falls off. And then I let that sit there for a minute, because at the end of maybe 15 minutes, then I'll go back and shake it off. All right, so let me go ahead and continue on with all these models, and then I'll be right back. All right, so we got a little leftover glue, no big deal, and we've got, these are all flocked, they just haven't been brushed off yet. And then what I need to do is, before I shake off all that, I gotta let it dry for about 5-10 minutes. Be right back.